It was the most important evening of my life, the night I would finally meet my fiancé's reclusive, notoriously difficult billionaire father. For 2 years, David had spoken about him in hushed tones, always with a strange mix of fear and reluctant respect. I had imagined the man 1,000 times, a cold, calculating figure hidden away in some vast mansion, judging the world from behind heavy oak doors. I was prepared, or at least I thought I was, for an intimidating dinner where every glance, every word, every gesture would be weighed like gold. What I was not prepared for was the man on the park bench. The invitation, if you could even call it that, had arrived in my inbox like a court summons. No warmth, no greeting, no small talk. Just a formal request, sent through a prestigious law firm. Mr. Arthur Sterling requests the presence of his son, Mr. David Sterling, and his companion, Ms. Ava Peters, for a formal dinner at his private residence. There was no please. There was no kind regards. It felt less like a family gathering and more like a corporate interrogation. David had read it over my shoulder and gone pale. "This is it," he'd said, almost whispering. "The test." Arthur Sterling was a ghost in the financial world. He had built an empire from nothing, dominated markets, outsmarted rivals, and then, at the height of his power, had vanished. For over a decade he had lived in near total seclusion inside his sprawling, walled estate. The stories about him were the stuff of legend, brilliant, eccentric, ruthless, and utterly unforgiving. He had once disowned David's older brother for marrying a woman he deemed unsuitable. And now, it was my turn under his microscope. The week leading up to the dinner was a slow-burn nightmare. David, usually so calm, became a wreck, pacing the apartment, muttering rules under his breath, writing mental scripts for me. "Don't mention your job at the non-profit. He'll see it as weakness. Don't talk about your parents' background. Stick to art, history, economics. Wear the navy blue dress. And the scarf, the cashmere one I bought you." He notices details. But the most important rule of all was burned into my brain: don't be late. On the morning of the dinner, I felt like an actress about to step on stage for the performance of her life. I pressed the dress until every seam was razor-sharp, draped the scarf just so, and practiced neutral but pleasant expressions in the mirror. By the time I stepped off the train into the wealthy, tree-lined streets near the Sterling estate, my nerves were so taut they might have snapped if anyone so much as looked at me sideways. David was already at the mansion. The plan was for me to take a taxi from the station. But when I breathed in that crisp suburban air, I made a last-minute decision to walk. I needed the rhythm of my footsteps, the quiet space to collect myself before stepping into the lion's den. The streets were lined with gates that hid enormous homes, the kind you never see in real life unless you're delivering mail. I was halfway to the estate when I saw him, an elderly man sitting alone on a park bench near a small, manicured green. His clothes were worn and mismatched, his face lined with years of hardship. He was shivering in the cool air, his thin jacket useless against the breeze. Everything in me screamed, "Keep walking. You're cutting it close. This is not the time." But then he looked up at me, and his eyes, startlingly clear blue, held such quiet sadness that I couldn't move past him. In my bag was the simple sandwich I'd packed for myself. I knew it would mean showing up on an empty stomach, but something deep in me wouldn't let me pass. I offered it to him, and he took it with a quiet thank you, studying me as if I were something unexpected. When he shivered again, I did the one thing David would have considered unforgivable. I took off my expensive cashmere scarf and draped it gently around his shoulders. "You need this more than I do," I told him. He smiled, a soft, knowing smile that lingered in my mind even after I hurried away. And then I looked at my watch, and froze. I was late. Not just late, catastrophically late. My pace quickened until I was nearly running by the time I reached the towering wrought iron gates of the Sterling estate. David was waiting on the grand stone steps, fury etched into every line of his face. "Ava," he hissed, grabbing my arm. "You're 17 minutes late." He hates tardiness. This is a disaster. He scanned me and then stopped cold. "Where's the scarf?" I told him the truth. His voice rose in disbelief. "You gave a $700 scarf to a bum?" His words hit like a slap. But deep down, I knew I'd made the right choice. The massive oak doors opened. The butler ushered us in, leading us down a marble hallway lined with oil portraits of grim-faced ancestors. Every step echoed like a countdown. The dining room doors opened, and I froze. At the far end of an impossibly long table sat the man from the park bench, my cashmere scarf still draped around his shoulders. The homeless man was Arthur Sterling. David's face drained of color. His father's voice carried across the table, "Welcome, Ava. Please, sit beside me." Then he turned to David, his eyes cold as steel. "She passed my test. You did not." What followed was a dinner unlike anything I could have imagined, not a polite interrogation, but a warm, genuine conversation. Arthur asked about my work, my upbringing, my values. He praised my kindness. By dessert, I realized this wasn't just about me. It was a lesson for his son, a public, unforgettable reminder of what truly matters. When we left, Arthur told David, "Your future in my company is secure, not because of you, but because of her. Do not underestimate her again." 3 months later, David and I married in my parents' garden. Arthur attended, not in disguise this time, but with my scarf proudly around his shoulders like a badge of honor. And I knew, without a doubt, I had passed the only test that mattered. Because sometimes, the true measure of a person is how they treat a stranger, when they think no one is watching.